The new URC season is getting underway this very weekend, folks. It caught me slightly by surprise, the fact that the club competition is getting back underway. It should not, because the URC is already a couple of weeks behind the top 14. French club rugby has been underway for a while, but I'm still very much focused on the Rugby Championship, the All Blacks and Boks and Wallabies, Pumas and whatnot, which features some URC players. So that competition is still going, but the URC itself is getting underway. So it's an interesting time of year. The guys who played mid-year will often be rested. The Rugby Championship guys are still with their teams. So it's potentially a chance for some of the teams who don't have as many big gun players to make a bit of hay while the sun shines, and the other teams are a little bit under strength. But we'll go through the odds, which do come from a bookmaker. So as always, take those with a bit of a degree of caution. And I should say the bookies have every year since the URC's inception tipped Leinster to win, and yet Leinster only have the one title thus far, which was last season. But yeah, we'll go through these bookies odds, flick them into a percentage, and you guys can let us know your thoughts on how fair or not you reckon they are. I've put the whiteboard into kind of the teams who made the playoffs last season and the teams who did not. We can kind of get through the teams who didn't make the playoffs pretty quickly, because most of them are being given less than a 1% chance to win the comp, which is essentially being written off in terms of any kind of credible push, maybe for the playoffs at best, but certainly not a title push for all the sides on this side. The only ones who are even given a 1% chance, who didn't make the playoffs last year, are the likes of Ulster, the Lions, and Connacht. So everyone else is on less than a percent. The bottom ranked side is actually Zebre, which is a little bit surprising because it was the Dragons who only got the one win last season, and yet Zebre did a fair bit better than that. They got 15th spot on the log, which is only one spot better, but they were points-wise quite far ahead of the Dragons. But yeah, the Dragons, the Ospreys, none of the Welsh sides are predicted to do anything. But the Lions, Connacht, and Ulster, of all the kind of non-playoff teams, are predicted to get at least that 1% chance. Of the teams who did make the playoffs, I mentioned the Welsh sides are not predicted to do anything. The Scarlets are also not at a percent. So the Scarlets are ranked behind Benetton, Ulster, the Lions, and all the playoff teams from last season, and Connacht. So the Scarlets, last year's playoffs run, they did finish 8th. So they just snuck in. Is predicted to be, well, a one-off. They're not predicted to make much of an impact on the competition this year. Edinburgh is on 1%. Edinburgh always feels like a squad which is relatively stacked, because they do have a lot of Scottish internationals in the team. But yeah, consistency always seems to be a thing with them. They've always got a nice looking jersey, though. We'll have to have a look at the jerseys at some point this year. They were quarterfinalists last year, so it's not really high praise for a team that made the quarters. And then, interestingly, Munster ranked significantly higher, potentially on the back of winning the URC not that long ago. Munster are given an 8% chance. I am keen to see how Kiwi Clayton McMillan goes with Munster. His team once again bombed out in the Super Rugby final. The guy was the king of getting the team to the Super Rugby finals and looking very good in the regular season, plays very attractive rugby. But yeah, we'll see what kind of impact he can have with Munster. Munster are favoured to do decently well, at least with the bookies anyway. Better than a team who finished above them in the Stormers. Stormers are only given 5%. Stormers have also got a heck of a roster. They're also a team that struggles a little bit for consistency. Like, you look at that Stormers backline, and at times they look world class, and at times they look like they're a team handling a bar of soap instead of a ball. It's just a real mixed bag. They'll be one of the teams who will be, I don't know, interesting to see how they go without some of their international players. Then last year's semi-finalists, the Sharks, ranked kind of slightly ahead of Munster in terms of the numbers, 9%. John Plumtree gets a lot of stick for that team underperforming, but last season compared to the season before was a dramatic improvement in terms of the results. I don't know that the on-the-field product was ever looking the finished product. So maybe its third season is the charm for John Plumtree. He certainly got a squad full of talented players, but we'll see if they can get that kind of cohesion. Then another team who won it not that long ago, Glasgow Warriors, only 6%. So below the likes of the Sharks and below Munster as well. So maybe a little bit, they were semi-finalists last year, maybe a little bit undervalued compared to some of the other sides. And there's last year's finalists. You know who number one is. But the Bulls, new coach as well, Johan Ackerman. I really rate that guy from his time with the Lions. He was an absolute, had an absolute team on fire. Another guy who couldn't quite crack it on in the final. And then I saw him at Gloucester as well. I seemed to be playing pretty good rugby. I didn't follow him any of his matches in Japan, but yeah, I'm keen to see what he can do with the side taking over from Jake White, who left in a bit of a huff. He had a bit of a rant. So fingers crossed, the breath of fresh air in Pretoria can help out the Bulls guys. 14% though for last year's runner-up. But that means all the other teams combined are still not given as much of a chance as Leinster at 51%. Obviously, I am very keen to see how Rieko Ioane goes with Leinster, because if you haven't been watching the Rugby Championship or even Super Rugby, he's struggled a little bit for form. He's looked like okay in the midfield, and they've given him a couple of games on the wing where he's kind of struggled to get his hands on the ball. Leinster seem to have a knack of getting the best out of players with their coaches, so please do that with Rieko before you send him back. But yeah, 51%. Leinster are once again massive, massive favourites. It's always a thing with Leinster to see how they manage their squad through Champions Cup and through the kind of URC, fixtures. They tend to rotate the squad a fair bit. It's always one that Leo Cullen gets a fair bit of scrutiny for. But at least they got the URC title done last year. So yeah, as I said, it'll be an interesting opening weekend with many big gun players missing. Stormers against Leinster feels like it should be a pretty interesting one, but there will no doubt be a lot of players that I am somewhat unfamiliar with as both squads' depth is tested. But yeah, you guys let us know your thoughts. How do you reckon this season is going to go? Can you see anyone stopping Leinster? What do you make of the new coaches who are on the scene for this year's season? You guys take care. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, because we'll be following the URC for the entire season. Should I change the Stormers logo? They've changed it to like this thing, right? Stormers. Not sold on it just yet, but anyway. You guys take care, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See ya.